Donald Trump, in a very ironic fashion, has been a beneficiary of the one thing that polarized people, his incessant tweets and social media communications and declarations. And once he was quite unfairly banned, he lost all avenues of immediate, off-the-cuff, extemporaneous commentary, and that actually has helped him. So now he sits back as a kingmaker at Margot in Florida at his compound, and whether we like it or not, the Trump agenda is now the Republican agenda, and apostates from that agenda have no political support. So if you're Nikki Haley and you want to deviate, you're free to do it, but you're going to be met with popular opposition.
I see.
If you're DeSantis or Tom Cotton or Mike Pompeo, whatever candidate you are, you've got to make a hijira, pilgrimage to Florida, and you have to cut a deal with Donald Trump. And by that I mean you don't criticize him personally.
Right.
And then you adopt his agenda, because his agenda was basically 80% of the Republican traditional agenda with 4 or 5 very important tweaks. You were going to get tough and be realistic with China. You were going to secure your border and have legal only immigration. You were not going to write off the industrial Middle West of the United States. You were going to not have optional interventions in the Middle East that didn't work out in the cost benefit analysis. And you were going to push back, often crudely and crassly, against the left, its academia, Silicon Valley, the traditional media, social media, Wall Street, the corporate boardroom, professional athletes and sports. Multifaceted pushback in a way that Mitt Romney and John McCain and traditional Republicans played by the Marquis of Queensberry rules and just wouldn't do it. And so everybody accepts that now, but the problem is Donald Trump will be 78. And he keeps saying that I won't be a 78 in the way that Joe Biden is 78. But he's Donald Trump. And so I think people are coming to the conclusion, some of them, that he's sort of the traditional John Ford Western hero that we see in John Wayne movie, who The Searchers, or Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, or Shane, another movie, in which the townspeople call in the outsider who has a unique set of methodological skills to solve the problem which they don't want to get their hands dirty. And once he starts to succeed, they have the margin of error, or they are permitted then to question, second doubt how they ever employed somebody like this. You see it yourself in your own military history, as do we, with, in our case, a George Patton, a Curtis LeMay, and yours maybe a Bomber Harris in World War II. How dare we ever befoul ourselves with Bomber Harris? But you know what? If we were in 1942 and England didn't have very many options, and maybe Bomber Harris had a point.
Exactly.
And so that's the kind of figure Donald Trump is right now, I think. And people are debating whether they could win that necessary 5%. Donald Trump can win 45% of the vote right now against any Democrat, but can he win 51%? And people don't know that yet. But things have changed radically since January 21st because of this woke, critical race theory, revolutionary Biden regime. It's really, every day it's getting people more and more irate.
Do you think it's sort of been a kind of reaffirmation by the old elite, hasn't it really? I mean, when I say the old elite, I mean the pre-Trump elite. I mean, he was a disruptor, a street fighter who came in, but these people, it's almost like they've taken back with a vengeance, haven't they?
Yes, they're trying to, but they have not performed well. And what do I mean by that? Donald Trump did something very unusual in the Middle East. He used a unilateral approach. He said, we're not going to intervene in Iraq or Afghanistan, but you know what? If we have to take out Soleimani, we'll take him out and worry about the consequences later. We're not going to get out of the Iran deal. We're going to have the Abrams Accord. We're going to have unilateral and bilateral relationships with Israel and the Arab communities. We're not going to let the Palestinians have veto power over 500 million Arabs in the Middle East on questions of foreign policy. And the enemy of my enemy is my friend, which was the basis of the Abrams Accord, the common enemy, Iran. And we had calm. The elites were furious. They said, we have to have multi-party talks. We have to bring the Palestinians back. We have to give them $700 million, America must. And guess what? As soon as the Palestinians figured that out, and as soon as Iran figured out the sanctions were going to be lifted, then what happened? And the same thing is true now with the revelations that you and I discussed about COVID. The same thing is true about the border. We had a border where finally, after all the opposition from the U.S. military echelon, from the courts, from the left, with all of the stays and injunctions, Donald Trump built 500 miles of new wall. He said that you were not a refugee just because you crossed the border illegally. He deported people. He was willing to discuss amnesties for those who had not been back to Mexico since childhood, and we had no illegal immigration. The elites came in and said, this is racist. Children are in cages. We can't go. And guess what happened? More children are in cages. The border's a mess. So this bipartisan Washington, New York, Council on Foreign Relations, Brookings Institute, World Bank, International Economic Forum, Davos, all of those people have not performed well in the last year and a half. And so whether it's Brexit in your country or whether it's Make America Great in my country or what we're seeing in Europe, I think there's a lot of people that say at the end of all of this conundrum, you're left with an age-old wisdom that every constitutional state in the West has to trust the people, albeit with checks and balances and a constitutional system of national sovereignty with clearly defined borders and a unique custom and tradition and a reverence for its history. And the alternative is something like not the British parliamentary tradition or the American founders, but something right out of the nightmare of 1793 in France. Yes. And that's what this woke revolution is. It's Robespierre and the Reign of Terror.